This CPU right here is the Ryzen 7 7700, 8 cores, 16 threads, it's on AM5, and the best thing is, it's probably, in my opinion, the best value CPU out there, bar none at the moment with the current street prices. Now over the last year, I've been increasingly buying this CPU in higher quantities because not only does it sell really well in gaming PCs, but also that value is just getting better over time. Now also, coupled in with today's video sponsor, the prices can get even better. But basically, you can buy this all day, every day off AliExpress for $150 US delivered to your door. Now in today's video, we're going to be comparing it against the 9800 X3D at 1440p and 4K with the RTX 5070 Ti and also the RX 9070 XT instead of comparing it with the unobtainable RTX 5090. But also, later on in the video, I'll show you guys some 1080p low setting CPU benchmarks with the RTX 5090 anyhow, just so you get the whole complete picture if you're thinking about picking one of these up. But spoiler alert, this thing is extremely impressive on its own, but then coupled in with the price, it's looking like it's probably going to be the best CPU to get for value in 2025. But let's see how you can get it for a better price with today's video sponsor, which we'll show you right now. Which unfortunately for today's video sponsor, it's only for Aussies. I did push for worldwide because it's actually a really good sale, but they just said it's for Aussies this time only. But if you got a VPN, might be able to take advantage of it. Are you interested in getting this? Or perhaps this? Well, if so, today's video sponsor AliExpress has the perfect campaign for you. This is the AliExpress Cashback Challenge, where you can turn those shoppings into savings. So you don't want to miss this. This is probably one of the best sales out there at the moment. And let me break it down for you in the simplest and most exciting way possible. First, all you have to do is join my team, which is Team Tech Yes City. Once you're in, by clicking the link in the description below or scanning this custom QR code, which I'll put up on the screen, you'll instantly earn 5% cash back on everything you buy as long as the seller ships your item. That's money back in your pocket. But wait, this is just the beginning. As you shop, you'll also earn points. And these points unlock even more cash back, up to a whopping 15% total cash back. So unlike another particular company that says this, AliExpress actually does this, and this is the more you buy, the more you save. So basically, the more people that click on the link and the higher the team points, the more cash back we all get. So for detailed points rules, please check out AliExpress. I'll put some of the best deals up on the screen, and that is firstly the Ryzen 7 7700. This is probably my staple AliExpress CPU that I've been buying, but then there's also the Ryzen 7 7800 X3D. But also, if you want to join this team, click on the link in the description below. Start shopping, start saving. Let's get back to the video. Welcome back to Tech Yes City. Now we're going to go over the most insignificant results first, and we're going to go through them relatively quickly here with our RX 9070 XT and our 5070 Ti. And we're going to start off with Space Marine Warhammer 40K. This is where we got virtually no difference at both 1440p and 4K. In fact, the numbers are so insignificant, I'm going to roll through them as quickly as possible, starting next with Rift Breaker. And here's where we got a slight difference in the 0.1% lows, but really, when you're looking at the difference in the value of these CPUs, it's insignificant yet again. Now moving on to Marvel Rivals, I actually saw literally no difference here. There was nothing to report about, not just in the average FPS, but also the 0.1% lows showed no difference. Moving on to Fortnite, we did see a slight difference in the 0.1% lows, but for the most part, the average FPS was virtually the same at both 1440p and 4K high settings. But then we move on to Final Fantasy 16, and this was just like Marvel Rivals on these 1440p and 4K high settings. Really nothing different here, not just in the average FPS, but the 0.1% lows. And then moving over, however, to a bit of a curveball here. This was only at 1440p for Black Myth Wukong. This next title we're pulling up here, we did see a difference But keep in mind, the 0.1% lows at this resolution were already kind of playing up in the test that I'm doing here. I do believe this has to do with the game engine, but you're seeing for the better part here some shaky results on the Ryzen 7 7700 that do get alleviated with the 9800 X3D. So I guess one title out of the 7 that we've tested here, but then when we step up to 4K, we can see that this is less CPU intensive than 1440p, and so we do get virtually the same numbers at this resolution. So one thing I will say about Black Myth as well, I just don't think it's that well optimized to begin with. I have played this on older systems, for instance, versus say a game like Marvel Rivals, and Marvel Rivals has played a lot better on older systems, but Black Myth has just completely, and I mean completely, tanked on older systems in the past. Anyhow, last game that we got up here is Cyberpunk 2077 for the GPU intense benchmarks, and here's where we see at 4K virtually zero difference, and then yet again at 1440p, no difference. So up until this point, we're going to split this video into two different recommendations because I feel like the 7700 here, when it comes to what most people are going to be doing, and that's getting, say, a higher end GPU like the 5070 Ti or the 9070 XT, which you can actually get them, even though I don't like the prices on the shelves right now, they're much more realistic to obtain than, say, an RTX 5090. And so if you get one of these GPUs, and you say want to save a bit of money and get some of the best value for say playing at high settings 1440p or maybe 4K with say upscaling on, the Ryzen 7 7700 is going to do an absolutely phenomenal job. There's no real reason to go out and spend the extra $300 or so that the 9800 X3D is commanding, especially since that CPU is just selling at MSRP all day, every day. But also with the 9800 X3D in particular, since that CPU has been in such high demand, I've seen this personally in Japan as well as Australia, the actual price of that CPU has gone well above MSRP sometimes, even though lately I think it's coming back down to normal levels. There was still a phase there where it was just going and getting jacked up in price. But the trusty old Ryzen 7 7700, this thing's only actually consistently came down in price over the last year especially. And when we couple it in with a more realistic GPU pairing, it's actually doing phenomenally well. However, that said, we are now going to move on to the 1080p low benchmarks, which really stresses the difference between CPUs if there is one. And here's where we are going to use the RTX 5090. And for these benchmarks, I decided to pull up the competitive multiplayer titles that a lot of people want to see high FPS numbers for, especially not just for the average FPS, but for the 0.1% lows. And we'll start off here with Counter-Strike 2, and here's where we saw a difference. And I do have to laugh here before I do say these numbers, because we've got a difference here of 631 average FPS versus around 770. Now, the reason I laugh here is because if you cannot play these games at these levels of FPS, say for instance, if you're playing the game at 630 average FPS, and then you're getting owned, and you're blaming the CPU for those losses, I think it's not the CPU. I think there's a bit of a skill problem here at these levels. But that being said, if you are playing for top tier money, like there's a huge amount of money on the line, or there's a big tournament where you want to advance, and it's your absolute like most passionate thing in life is playing Counter-Strike 2, then of course the 9800 X3D is going to be a pretty solid purchase. And so it all comes down to just seeing these numbers and making the best choice for yourself. But for me personally, an example of this would be with Warcraft 3. I just started picking this game up again and replaying it, and on my main system I get around 120 over 120 average FPS with the reforged skins all available, and that's the new fancy UI. And then on my son's computer, I can maybe get around 70 to 80 average FPS. And so at these levels, it doesn't make a difference for me personally. The biggest thing that makes a difference for me playing Warcraft 3 really well is my concentration levels. And if I'm playing tired, for instance, I'm going to get absolutely owned if I'm not focusing. And so for me personally, if I play games nowadays, I usually play them in the morning when I'm much more energetic than as opposed to playing them later in the day. Anyhow, I got a bit sidetracked here, going off tangent, but what I really wanted to emphasize is that the FPS numbers at these 1080p low settings that I'm showing you are extremely good, even on the Ryzen 7 7700. In other words, if you can't get good at a game on this CPU, then I would say maybe just look for a different profession, as opposed to another scenario where you need to go out and buy a 9800 X3D, and then you're still not beating the pros at that game. And sorry guys, the reason I do laugh about this stuff is that selling PCs, I see this happen in Australia, especially when I'm flipping PCs. I see people that think that buying the best of the best is automatically going to make them good at games. And then I see like about 2 months later, that same system that I sold them, it's back up on the market again. But let's continue on with the numbers here. Marvel Rivals, and here's where we've got a difference in average FPS of around 14%. But when we look at the 0.1% lows, here's where there's actually a big gap, and that's around 34%. So for the 9800 X3D in particular, it's really starting to shine at 1080p low settings with maximum FPS to be obtained. And it's doing so with these 0.1% lows. So that was sort of the midway example. The next example we're going to show you here is probably the biggest, and that is Fortnite, and especially with those 0.1% lows. We can see that they're pretty much doubled on the 9800 X3D versus the Ryzen 7 7700. Even though the average FPS is still going up around 33%, it's those 0.1% lows that are really shining. Now, also, I know a lot of people ask me about undervolting and tuning with Precision Boost Overdrive on the CPU side. Here's with AMD CPUs, you can put in that extra 200 megahertz on the 7700 in the BIOS. I just, for this example, put it to -20 steps. It's usually a great starting point. -10, -20, or -30. You can usually obtain one of these levels in the Precision Boost Overdrive settings, and here's where the average FPS stepped it up, but you'll notice that the 0.1% lows really remained relatively the same. But the good news here is that the power consumption remains relatively the same, and this is not just for the case of the Precision Boost Overdrive, it's also for the case of the 9800 X3D versus the Ryzen 7 7700. So this is really what makes those X3D chips shining stars in my example, is that the power consumption is really kept under control despite the FPS on the 0.1% lows just skyrocketing in some games. But back to the Ryzen 7 7700 itself, the temperatures while we're gaming here, this is on a water cooler, keep in mind, but the temperatures were around 60 degrees while we're benchmarking in a 23C ambient environment. So they're going to be absolutely fine with a decent cooling solution, nothing to worry about. And then if you want to do a bit of productivity, we've got the Cinebench scores. They do get higher if you decide to lock in that Precision Boost Overdrive tune, which I do recommend. It's pretty much free performance, and you can get this close to 19,000 points, which is really good for this pure 8-core 16-thread symmetrical CPU. And now with all those numbers out of the way, it's time to talk about the Ryzen 7 7700. And you can probably see already by the smile of my face here, I think this CPU has just become the it factor. I think if you're building a new rig for gaming, or even if you want, say, a value production rig for video editing, this thing is going to be the absolute shining star in terms of value. I mean, 150 USD delivered to your door at this point in time. And also with AliExpress, you can sometimes take advantage, like today's video sponsor, AliExpress, you can sometimes get the coupon codes as well as these things like the 5% cashback, and it makes it even cheaper. Now, for me personally, the closing thoughts on this CPU, tremendously good value, but also when you're coupling it, which is what I wanted to see personally, when I'm coupling it with more obtainable GPUs, and I want to say sell PCs in the future, I know that this CPU is not going to let me down, and I'm going to be easily recommending it to most people, as well as those people who want to save a few bucks at the end of their whole system. So awesome CPU. The final thing you may wish to know about is memory speeds. I usually use a 6200 megahertz CL28, and this is actually from the G-Skill 6000 CL28 kit, which I found goes to 6200 on CL28 on pretty much all motherboards. I actually tested out a different kit here in Japan, which I got on sale, and that worked absolutely the same as well. So the G-Skill memory, I do recommend stretching it a little bit and getting this memory. It's really good for gaming. And also with this memory, after using it, I feel like the prices and the premium on the 32 gig kit especially just aren't that big, but the benefits definitely are. So if you're thinking about getting the 7700, I'd even try and maybe go a little bit extra and put away some money and get a really good kit of memory. That'd just be what I would do, even on a budget motherboard, like say a B650, if you can pick up one of those for a decent price. But do keep in mind, this thing is going to not chew up a whole lot of power, so you're not gonna have to sweat too much about your motherboard choice. And the graphics cards themselves, the PCIe Gen 4 versus Gen 5, it's really a moot point. There's not gonna be a whole lot of a difference there in terms of getting extra FPS. Anyhow, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions or comments about this CPU right here, then be sure to drop some comments down below or some questions if you got them. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. And if you enjoyed this one, be sure to hit that like button, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.